Over 95% of man's total cultural history involves the making of stone tools. The very first stone tools were nothing more than tools of opportunity. This is where a sharp stone was given a couple of whacks, and the sharp edge was applied. These were used for grubbing, for digging, as hand axes. This went on for almost 1,000,000 years. It wasn't until later on that prehistoric people started making stone tools out of the smaller fragments, or the flakes. Today we're going to discuss stone tools, their manufacture, and cores, or the things that the flakes come from, and some percussion and some flaking techniques. I'm using volcanic glass. This is really a semi-cooled liquid. If we were to go to another planet and put this on the planet's surface that had a little bit more gravity and came back, say, in a couple hundred years, it would be just a puddle. As glass, it's constantly flowing. In old window panes, the glass is always thicker at the bottom than at the top because for years it's been flowing downwards. As a semi-cooled liquid, volcanic glass also has a rind on it. This rind has a property where it's actually like rusting. It's hydrating. Archaeologists can measure this rind by measuring it thin sections in microns and then computing how thick it is and actually telling the age of when the artifact was made. Also, archaeologists are able to tell from which sources the obsidian was derived. Trace elements in the obsidian, rare earths, actually fingerprint the flow from which the obsidians come from. In the Middle East, obsidian has been traced from the Mediterranean into Asia. Here in the United States, we're able to trace obsidian coming from Yellowstone to approximately St. Louis. Obsidian and volcanic glass isn't all that the ancient peoples made tools from, such as agates. The crystals are so small they are microscopic, and these were used also for stone tools. Tools made from obsidian are the sharpest tools known to man. They rival even surgical steel. I'll try to take a few flakes off this. First of all, the cortex has to be removed. Its outside cortex is no good for me. The idea behind making flakes is that we're controlling a cone of force. Just like when a BB hits a pane of glass and there's a cone made. This is the same idea in making stone tools. This is called a conchoidal fracture, or a shell-like fracture. By controlling this cone, we're able to make flakes and other stone tools. So, preparing the striking platform. Following an edge. And drawing off a flake. Like I said, this is the sharpest substance on the man. I'll make a couple of blades here. A blade is a flake that's twice as long as it is wide. Notice me wearing a leather chap here. The person who taught me how to make stone tools was a graduate student, and he was demonstrating how to make stone tools, and he was going to use, he didn't have a leather chap here. And he struck the core wrong and drove a 6-inch flake right through the calf of his leg, right through his thigh. And I had to take him to the hospital and get it taken out. He never did make stone tools after that. This is the right flake here. Show you how sharp it is. I always sit down when I've been giving these demonstrations because my arm is all shaved up here. During this demonstration, you might see several cuts on my hands. Something that can't be avoided. The edge on this flake is only 10 molecules thick. It can't stand a lot of wear and tear, but it's disposable. You can easily make more flakes. Some of the ancient Mayans and Aztecs made flakes that were long surgical scalpels. Here they'd be able to use these for minor surgeries and for human sacrifice. They're also very, very sharp. They're also able to easily cut leather and skins. Later they started making tools off of the flakes from the cores. Archaeological sites that you might find, you can tell the different activities that were going on by the different types of flakes. The flakes that come off the core first are primary flakes, and they usually show some of this cortex on the outside of the flake. Several flakes and then choose there's a couple good ones, the ones that best will suit the tool we need. These small flakes are razor sharp. Different tribes, different people had several prohibitions that the flintnapper or maker of stone tools would observe. Some of them were not speaking. I find it hard to talk and make stone tools at the same time. There's another good flake. This core itself now could be used as a tool with that sharp edge on this side and a back side here. So take a couple of flakes. This method with the hammerstone, it's called a direct percussion method. Hammerstones were something special that the craftsman kept. They weren't discarded. You don't usually find them in quarries, but you find them after they've been worn out in trash piles, bins, things like that. Hammerstone can last half a lifetime. Stone tools were something that the craftsman cherished. In one place we found a prehistoric toolmaker's kit, which consisted of a bag of all of the hammerstones, the notchers, the flakers, pieces of sinew, all bound up in one bag, which was a total toolkit for a prehistoric flint knapper. The other method I'll show you is percussion with a baton. I always like to rough up the edges here so I don't get cut. It's a percussion method where the flakes are smaller and more controlled. The flakes are coming on the other neat side here. Over the years of doing this, I've built up a callus here, right on my thigh. What I'm doing now is thinning this large flake, taking off some bigger pieces from it. Thinning it so that the pieces I take from it will make it flatter. Preparing the striking platform so the tool will not slip off when I strike it. Going round and round in a pattern. Taking off the edges and making it flatter. Early North American Indians would use obsidian cinctures. Later, after contact in historic times, when actual bottle glass was available, some arrowheads were made out of it. I always hear the old story of the telegraph lines being down between here and Fort Defiance. A lot of times the Indians were throwing rocks at the insulators to get the bottle glass and making arrowheads out of it. In recent historic times, the Aborigines in Australia were still making stone tools, and the government had a hard time keeping the insulators up in the outback. The Aborigines would take rocks and throw them at the insulators. The government later solved the problem by dumping loads of bottle glass at the bottom of the power poles. Making it thinner, removing the flakes, preparing the edge. Taking the flakes off doesn't demand a lot of force or a lot of strength, but just the precise angle of strike. The prehistoric peoples did not carry around the big chunks of obsidian, but these small little preforms where they'd take it out to about this size right here and then take these back and carry these long distances. That way, if the rock had any impurities or other unknown cracks, the flint maker, flint napper, would be able to discover this before hauling the whole rock back to camp. Some places here in Oregon, you find caches of thousands of these flakes that have been roughly shaped and thinned. Always want to take one last hit. A little bit more thinning here. From here, we can go to another method of flint napping called pressure flaking. Pressure flaking was usually done with antlers. Deer antler is the preferred. It's denser than elk or antelope. And the idea is to still control that cone of force, but instead of striking it by applying pressure to the edge and going down, this helps prepare the platforms. And the idea is to press down and in at the same time, taking flakes off the bottom of the piece. Small little flakes being taken off at the bottom. These small little flakes, if you find them in an archaeological site, are usually indicators of pressure flaking. There's been a recent revival in making stone tools. Around the turn of the century, it was a lost art. Much of our information about stone tool manufacture comes from observing one of the last Yaqui Indians, Ishi. Ishi was in the chaparral with his family when, around the turn of the century, when a group of government surveyors came through and they found what they thought was this abandoned campsite. He and his family were out foraging, and they took some souvenirs, which was Ishi's toolkit, baskets, practically all that the family owned. And they came back and saw that all of their tools and baskets had been stolen. Being late in the year, most of the family just reserved themselves to die. Ishi wandered down the chaparral to a corral and leaned up against a fence post and was prepared to die. The rancher found him, contacted Dr. Al Krober, and Krober studied the way that Ishi made arrowheads and other stone tools, and from those experiments, much of our knowledge about stone tool manufacture came to be known. It was once thought that stone tools were made by heating up rocks and dripping cold water on them. What is happening is that some of the cherts and flints chip better after they've been heated and annealed. And Indians would place the nodules and flakes under a fire for a few days and anneal them in the warm sands underneath a fire, then take them back out and they'd chip easier. When the colonists saw this, they thought that they were dripping cold water on hot rocks. But just like adding cold water to hot iron, most of the time it results in explosion of the piece. These same types of tools, these antler tools, we also find in archaeological sites with the same wear. Rather than have a point on the antler, it's desirable to have it flattened or truncated. Some of the flakes here are starting to go halfway across. On the next pass, go all the way across. At that point, part of the problems is having the flakes go clear across the face of the piece to the other side and taking off the opposite edge. The recent revival in stone tool manufacture has put some added discoveries. Because it's so sharp, obsidian produces very little trauma. The edge produces very little trauma in operations. Several modern-day flint knappers have undergone bypass surgery or eye surgery, and the trauma resulting has been very minimal. I once cut myself from here on my thumb up to my wrist by reaching down and getting a piece of obsidian, and I was able to, normally I'd get stitches with it, but I put a piece of masking tape over it and healed in about 2 days. Take one more line of flakes off the bottom edge here. And here the flakes come all the way across. All the way across the piece. And the notches are made with a real flattened antler or piece of rib. pressed against the side of the artifact. And from here, the edges were usually dulled. Before mounting with a piece of steel. In summary, most of the stone tools were core tools or large flake tools. Later, pressure methods were able to make smaller artifacts, artifacts that could then be placed that would hold an edge longer. I've been doing this for around 15 years. You can learn the principles in a few hours. After that, all it is then is practice.